talking about food sovereignty, which is essentially a fancy expression for knowing where our food has come from. Unfortunately, in 2022, most of us in the Western world are able to shop and buy food somewhat unconsciously. And what I mean by that is we have the privileged position that our supermarket aisles and shelves are packed full of produce, and that's sort of 24/7 right across the year. It's not seasonal, it's just an abundance of food. And so what comes with that is this unappreciation of where that food has come from, and this automated acceptance of food into a basket and trolley, and off we go to the checkout. There's not much consideration as to where that food has come from. And I'm not just talking about animal sources here, I'm talking about any fresh produce. So why is it important to consider where that food has come from? Well, how that food has been produced or grown has huge ramifications as to the local ecology, animal welfare, and ultimately human health. To my mind, there's two distinct food systems that we have access to. One is a very industrialized food system, and again, this is not married to either meat or plant, it can be both. And one is a very progressive, regenerative, sustainable food system. And the system over here, the methodology over here, isn't new. It's a very age-old system and methodology and attitude to land management. But unfortunately, over the last 100 years, the industrialized version of food production has, gained a lot of momentum, and it's often the one that we think about when we think about particularly raising animals. So we need to make a distinction first of all, because it's a hot topic. You can add in a detrimental way to the destruction of ecology and environments and contribute to the global climate crisis, whether you're choosing plant or whether you're choosing animal. It matters in either context how that plant or how that animal has been grown and raised. So there's a methodology called regenerative farming, where you put your soil at the core of your business, and by ensuring a healthy soil, and ensuring healthy soil means biodiversity, so more microbes within the soil itself. Its ability to hold water is increased as a consequence of its ability to sequester carbon from the atmosphere, more plant life, more biodiversity. And so you encourage many multi-species. We start to get away from this conventional industrialized version where it's single species, whether that's cattle or plant. So in the plant world, as a consequence of industrialized farming, there are huge swathes of land given up to corn or soy or grain. That isn't mirrored in the real world, in nature. There's always a multitude of species that propagate over a given land mass. And so regenerative is more in line with that. It leans into nature and works with nature. So it's never this single species, whether plant or animal, event. So how do you and I separate the wheat from the chaff and understand exactly where our food has come from? It's not always easy, and it does mean that you become essentially a bit of a food detective. It might mean reading some labels, it might mean visiting brands, websites. At the very least, we can speak to store managers, we can speak to butchers and fishmongers, and we can ask, where has that beef come from? Where has that salmon come from? Where has that fill in the blank come from? And then if they don't know, it's up to them to find out, or it comes back to you, the onus comes back to you, and it's up to you to find out. But if many of us are asking those types of questions to the butcher, fishmonger, cafe owner, restaurateur, then at some point that person will feel less inclined to say, oh, I don't know. They want to find out where that beef comes from because they want to sound informed and knowledgeable. And so we start to work bottom up and put pressure on producers and growers to do the right thing by us, and to do the right thing by the ecology, and to do the right thing by animal welfare. So it's bi-directional. It needs to come from the bottom up and the top down. And somewhere in the middle is there's this beautiful sweet spot where we're looking after the land, we're looking after the global environment, and we're looking after animal husbandry. And at that point, I'm confident we can feed the planet nutritious, delicious food whilst not deteriorating those sensitive areas of ecology and in the environment. In actual fact, I love this expression of it's not the cow, it's the how. Who would have thought one of the most potent, significant avenues to get us away from the climate crisis is livestock, is the cow. If managed in the right way, we can help the grass sequester more and more carbon, locking carbon in the soil. Again, carbon-rich soil is a soil and an environment to hold water, and that's deadly important in a country like Australia, which is often drought-stricken. So, do your reading, do your research. I'll put some links in this module below. There's a great TED Talk, a great point, entry point to this whole conversation of food sovereignty is a TED Talk by Alan Savory. There's a few key players in this world, and there's a few key players in Australia. And I myself am a big proponent of regen. I wrote a book on the food systems in general, those two distinct ones that I talked about, the regenerative food system versus the conventional industrialized food system, and how to navigate those. And I wrote that book in 2019 called The Sustainable Diet. So I'm a big fan of asking the important questions of where our food has come from, and don't be embarrassed to do that. The more people that do that, the more pressure we put on butchers and restaurant owners and cafe owners and store managers, because they then have to ask the question of the producer and the grower. And if they can't answer in a truthful and honest and an answer rich in integrity, then it might mean that they have to edit the way that they manage their land. So look at the links, explore this area. It's a really important area. This is a module that's not a practical module in a sense that we're not in the kitchen, we're not getting our hands dirty. It's more of a philosophical debate. It's more of an attitude, and these things don't change overnight. But I think watching and listening to some key material and resources within this space can really sort of wet the whistle and become the catalyst to ask those important questions of ourselves. And there might be a re-edit of our values that key into the core principles that enable us to replenish the land, improve animal husbandry, and improve the health of the planet, essentially.